Hey there, in this video we're going to learn about execution context in JavaScript. This is a fundamental concept that explains how code is internally executed. Before starting off with what execution contexts are, let's start by declaring some variables and defining some functions. In JavaScript, variables are either name value pairs or objects. To understand the statement in detail, let's start by declaring some variables. To do so, I have created a folder and I have opened that in VS Code. Firstly, I'm going to create a HTML file index.html, and to get the boilerplate code, I'm going to hit exclamation mark and enter. There you go. We got the base code. And now I'm going to write a h1 tag, hello world. This is just to check if we are able to render this or not. And I'm opening that with live server. This took me to the browser and hello world is painted. Now we are going to create a JS file. Before that, I'm going to create a folder execution context within which I'm creating a file index.js. Let me write a simple JavaScript snippet, something like hello world from JS. And to embed this JavaScript file within a HTML code, I'm going to copy relative path, and using script tag I'm going to embed our JavaScript file src, and I have given a relative path here. Let's see if it's reflecting here. I'm going to refresh and going to inspect console. Yeah, we are able to see hello world from JavaScript. So whatever the changes that we make here in the JS file, we'll be able to see here. Let's start by declaring some variables. I'm going to declare a string variable name channel name text up now, and let me log it. Channel name. Yeah, it's reflecting here. This is how we will be able to declare variables in JavaScript. In the same way we can do for numbers as well. Num5, and I'm going to log it with num. Yep. If you closely see here, variables are nothing but name value pairs. Here channel name is the name and text sapna is the value. Similar is the case with here. Moving on to the next word that I have mentioned here, objects. In JavaScript, objects are nothing but a collection of these name value pairs. If you see, this is the name, and as a value we are again having a collection of name value pairs. This is nothing but an object, and again it can have value as an object again. Let's see, to understand this in detail, let's see how do we write objects in JavaScript. This is a simple example of object where name is the person is the name, and as the value we are having a list of name value pairs. Name John, age 30, and address, it's again going to have a list of name value pairs, and these name value pairs are enclosed within the curly braces. This is nothing but what we call in JavaScript is object literal syntax. Now going back to our statement, objects are collection of name value pairs where value can be an object itself. Now this might be making more sense. Moving on to functions. This is how we define functions. This is one of the ways to define functions in JavaScript using function keyword. Here greet is the function name, and function body we are including within the curly braces. And any input data that we want to provide, we can provide it within the parenthesis, and if we want to return anything, we can return that using return statement. Let's see functions in action now. Yeah, coming back to our code, I'm going to remove these two lines and I'm going to create a function square num, and I want this function to take a number as input and return its square as output. And now I'm gonna declare a variable result and calling this function num square with num value as 5. And to see the result, I'm gonna log it. Yeah, it's reflecting here 25. We're good so far. We have seen how to declare variables and how to define functions. Now let's try to tweak this code a bit. I'm gonna move this log statement one step above. Essentially, I'm trying to access a variable before even it's initialized. What do you think would happen? Yeah, it's giving something known as undefined. What is undefined? We'll see later on, but let's try to do the same with functions. I'm going to move these two lines above the function definition. Let's move on to the browser and see. I have refreshed it, but it's still giving me the same value. Why? If you closely observe here, JavaScript's behavior with respect to variables is quite different than with respect to functions. When I'm trying to access a variable that is not initialized yet, that is giving me something known as undefined. But if I'm trying to call a function before its definition, it's giving me result. Why is this happening? To understand this behavior more in detail, we need to dive deep into execution context. Remember, everything in JavaScript is executed within something known as execution context. Let's say we invoke a function. Then internally an activation record will be created to execute this function, and that record has information about what are the parameters, what is the function body, from where the function is getting called, etc. Essentially, whatever information that the JavaScript engine needs to maintain the flow of execution, all this information, it keeps it inside execution context. Just to imagine, you can imagine it something like a wrapper that helps manage the code that is running. And this execution context happens in two phases. One is creation phase and the second one is execution phase. In the creation phase, firstly, it looks up for all the variables and functions within our piece of JavaScript code, and it creates memory space for them. It allocates memory. And in the execution phase is when it executes code line by line, and whatever we are doing, we are assigning variables, then it assigns values to the variables. Execution phase is when it executes our code. To understand this in more detail, let's consider our code example and we will see these phases in detail. I'm going to take screenshot of our code and taking this onto a canvas. Yep. And I'm going to create an execution context here. Yep. As I have mentioned, execution context happens in two phases. Firstly, let's look at creation phase. Let me increase the font a bit. Yes. Creation phase. Yep. In the creation phase, first it looks at all the variables and function definitions. What all variables do we have here? Firstly, first line is just an execution line, and second line number 2, we are initializing a variable. Now it picks up this variable and it creates memory space for it. And once it allocates memory for it, it has to initialize with some value, right? In JavaScript, it doesn't initialize with any garbage value. Instead, it initializes with something known as undefined. What is undefined? Undefined is nothing but a special value in JavaScript that is given to variables that are not initialized yet. The same thing is applicable for all the variables across this snippet. Let's move on to line number 4. Here we have come across a variable result. So here it creates memory space for that and gives undefined as its default value. And line number 5 is execution line. And coming to line number 7, we have come across a function. For variables, I have mentioned default value is given as undefined. But what happens to functions? When JS Engine comes across any function definition, then it creates memory space for the function name and its entirety. For its entire body, for the entire definition of the function, it gives memory space. At this moment, we can give entire function definition the memory space. So I'm gonna write this entire definition within our execution context, returns num. Yeah, this is how memory space would look like at the end of creation phase. And now moving on to our execution phase, I'm gonna create a duplicate of this, and let me create a console as well. This is our console. Yes, let me rename this to execution phase. In execution phase, what happens? It runs through code line by line. It starts with line number 1. It's a log statement. Now it starts logging into the console, channel name, and it looks up for this variable within the memory. Do we have memory for that? Yes, we do have. And what's the value that it's holding right now? It's holding the value of undefined. That's the reason it's logging undefined here. And later on in the line number 2 is where we are initializing it. At this moment, in the execution phase, it overrides undefined value with text sub now. Later on, if we are trying to access this variable channel name, then it gets the value text sub now. And moving on to line number 4, it's saying this is where we are calling the function. Firstly, do we have memory space for the variable result? Yes, we do have. And let's look up the function within the memory space. Do we have function definition? Yes, it's available here. Now it executes this function with input value as 5. Once it executes it, it returns some value. It returns the value 25. And once we get the value from here, it overrides undefined value to 25. And moving on to line number 5, it's a log statement. This is where it's gonna log result 25. This is the reason why we are getting undefined, and this is the reason why it's working fine with the functions. And let's compare it with the result that we have got in the browser. Yes, it's completely in sync. Now we have understood how execution context works, and this concept is also known as hoisting in JavaScript. Let's see what's the definition of hoisting from the JavaScript docs itself. Yeah, this is the MDN hoisting link. You can go through it. I'm just increasing the font. Yeah. In JavaScript, hoisting refers to the process where whatever are the declarations of functions and variables, they appear to move to the top of their scope. It appears to move all the declarations of functions and variables to the top of their scope. But we know what internally is happening now. And after that is what execution of code happens. And what is the benefit that we are having here? Here we are able to access variables value even before it's declared. It will always have undefined, but at least it will not throw a reference error. What is reference error? Let's move on here, and within the same example, firstly, if I'm trying to access a variable before it's initialized, it's giving me something known as undefined. Let me comment this one out. Let's see what happens. Yeah, within the error, we are getting reference error, which says channel name is not defined. This is what is the reference error that they're referring to. If we are going to access variable that is not at all declared, then JavaScript throws that error of reference error. But when we have initialized that, it gives something known as undefined. This is all about the hoisting. What did we learn so far in this video? Firstly, we had a look at variable declarations and function definitions. And then we moved on to what are execution contexts and the phases in execution context, creation phase and execution phase. At the end, we ended up defining hoisting. Whatever we have seen in this video, I have pushed that to GitHub along with the very detailed notes along with examples. I'm going to provide this repository link in the description box. Please check that out. That's all for this video. See you in the next video.